waiting for people to join. It says trying to reconnect. Good afternoon everyone, welcome to Sea Life Sydney. We're here joining Bella, one of our penguin keepers, and our little penguins are getting their afternoon snacks. So I did just say little penguins, that is one of their common names. You also might know them as the fairy penguin or the little blue penguin depending where you live. Now why they're called little penguins or little blue penguin? The first reason they're called little penguins is they are in fact the smallest of all penguins in the world. Why little blue? They're in fact the only penguin species to have a true blue feather coat. The rest of them typically have a dark grey, dark black, and that's what makes these guys particularly unique. So right now we're feeding them their favourite snacks. I'll just zoom into the bucket a little bit for you. This here is Pilchard, and Pilchard is one of the most common species taken by little penguins. So in this particular feed right in front of us right now, we're recording how many fish they're eating, making sure they get their fish that has their meds or their vites in it. You can see we've got a nice tally there. And this way we can track their health and their growth and make sure they're getting enough to eat every single day. So basically these guys, what makes them so cool is being the smallest penguin. How big in fact, I often get asked, is about 1.5 kilos for a full grown adult, all the way down to about 1 kilo for a smaller female. But typically in molting period, when they actually bulk up their diet, they can be closer to that 2 kilo mark. Now why do they bulk up so dramatically? Pretty much that's to give them the fat reserves and energy reserves when they're molting their old feathers, and that time they're not fully waterproof, so they need that extra reserves. Now we're at a different time, we're not molting just yet, we're actually in the middle of our breeding season. So breeding season for little penguins is quite unique. First of all, you might see in the background some little boxes. These are the nest boxes that they live in. So nest boxes help them stay out of sight from predators, which is one of their main threats. It also means they can keep their chicks nice and well incubated, as the temperature is much more constant underground versus on the land. So they don't build nests like birds do, they actually dig their burrows or reuse burrows from other species. So hey everyone in the chat, if you do have any questions, please do post them, we'll try and get to them. So right now with these guys, the diet typically is mostly pilchard. They'll also eat anchovies. Sometimes they'll also pick off the occasional jellyfish, and also been recorded eating small squids as well. So pretty opportunistic, and that's because in the wild food is not a guarantee. So when they see food, like a big school of fish, they will gorge themselves, as they never know when they might see that big school again. So how much are they eating right now? We're typically feeding about 10 pilchards each feed, probably the equivalent of you and I eating about 10 hamburgers in a single meal. So they do have a very, very fast metabolism to make sure they can process all that. Now you can see that famous gait the penguins have when they walk. Pretty much those wings are out there for balance, also for drying, but their primary purpose is to propel them through the water. They don't use their feet to push them through the water like other seabirds do. They just use their wings to propel them. So I do often get asked, where do we find little penguins in Australia? You can find them in New South Wales, even in Manly's where the last mainland colony exists. You can also find them in Western Australia, down in the south part of Western Australia, Victoria, Tasmania, and South Australia's got a big population down there. So back to the Sydney one. The Sydney population only exists in Manly. The rest of it is offshore, and that's where predators can't reach them. And the current population in Sydney is considered endangered. Basically, they have many threats, which I'll go into shortly, but that's what makes them so special and such a rare occurrence to see in Sydney at the moment. I'm just getting asked, what are the vitamins for? So when you freeze the fish to store them for a while, you do lose a lot of nutrients. So these vitamins help bring the essential nutrients back in, just like you and I having a multivitamin to make sure we have a healthy immune system. I get asked in the comments, what are they eating? So this pilchard, we'll have a look at a pilchard. So pilchards are nice oily fish, about 10 centimeters long is the typical one or size they might take. And they'll easily eat 10, maybe even 20, depending on the time of the year. I'm getting asked, are these blue penguins? Yes, they are blue penguins. You also might know them as fairy penguins or little blue penguins, depending where you're from. The smallest of all penguins. So, in terms of populations, the numbers have been quite varied in studies. We can hear numbers as low as 300,000 worldwide, all the way up to about 600,000. So basically, numbers are not consistent everywhere around the world. For the manly population I was mentioning before, there's only about 60 pairs remaining in the wild. So why so few in Sydney in the wild anymore? Basically, a few issues are contributing to that. The first issue is overfishing. So as much as they love fish, humans do too. And unfortunately, there's a big history of taking too many fish too quickly and not giving enough time for it to recover. So they are outcompeted by humans in that regards. Another question I'm getting asked is, how tall are they? So these guys and girls in front of me here are about 30 centimeters tall, give or take a few centimeters. Just like humans, they do vary dramatically in height though. They don't get any bigger than what we're looking at right now. And for reference, you can see Bella, a little bit taller than your average size human. But basically, they are very, very tiny animals. Now, being so small, they do face a lot of threats in the wild, particularly predators. In terms of natural predators, basically the only things that will be catching them in the water would be things like sea lions, occasionally seals that come up all the way to their populations. Birds of prey like your giant petrel and your skewers, and some giant gulls like your kelp gull and Pacific gull are known to take them. So they do have a lot of issues to worry about, but luckily you can see that beautiful blue and white body. The white belly allows them to camouflage from marine predators like sharks as well. When they look up to see a penguin above them, they blend in very, very nicely with the sky. And that dark blue back does the same purpose when a predator flies above or swims above them. That blue body blends in with the deep blue water very, very nicely. I'm getting asked, do they breed once a year? And do they share looking after the eggs? So very, very good question there. So little penguins are quite unique in the fact that they can lay 2, potentially 3 clutches a year. Most of the bigger penguins you see lay only 1 clutch this year. So do they share looking after that, and how big is a clutch? A clutch is typically 2 eggs for your little penguins. You can hear some of them singing in the background right now. So these 2 little eggs are about 55 grams in weight, and they take about 36 days of incubation to be hatched. Now, yes, both parents definitely do share the roles. Penguin society, especially for these guys, is very, very equal. It's about 50% of time on the nest while the partner goes out to sea and gets food for the next shift. A bit different though from the emperor penguins we all know, where the males do the bulk of the incubation. So I did get asked, how do we take care of them? That's a very, very good question. So we spend a lot of time in the morning cleaning the sand. You can see there's a bit of poop, bit of food left over, so we're making sure we're removing that so nothing bad can grow in the exhibit. We're also cleaning the water, which they share with some fish like your brim. You can see a Port Jackson shark swimming there as well. And then we're also doing a fair bit of nest cleaning, getting materials ready. You can see our plants around us, they'll be building their nest out of leaves that fall off, as well as eucalyptus leaves. We got one right next to me here. I'm getting asked, what do they smell like? So I'm about a metre away from this. They do smell a little bit fishy, a bit salty, but definitely not the worst smelling animal. We got Verona coming and join us here. Verona is one of our youngest birds. Our colony here ranges between 2 of our youngest, just about 2, all the way up to 19 for our oldest lady. So how old do penguins typically live in the wild? We expect a good long life, about 7 years, as I mentioned, for all those predators and threats they face. But in a scenario where you move oil spills, plastic debris, they have a constant supply of food here. We can easily double that for just about every bird in here. So it is quite amazing to see them grow up and be quite unique. I'm getting asked, how small are they? So easily the smallest of all penguins. The birds we're looking at in front of us are about 1 to 1.5 kilos in weight. It does vary a bit between males and females. Typically your males are a bit larger. And in terms of height, they're only about 30 centimeters tall, not much bigger than that. We can happily answer them. So you can see in the background, some of these birds are sort of shaking off their bodies. Yep, I can come a bit closer to the penguins in just a minute. We just want to give them a second to make sure they're digesting that food. But you'll see a bit of shaking of their feathers and their bodies, and basically that's them assisting with the digestion. A bit like when we get the food sweats or shakes. So that's their solution. So getting asked, you must get attached to them and get to know their personalities. Absolutely. So they are a bit like family to us, and they certainly have their own family bonds. And their personalities are very, very different, just like humans. Some of them are really confident and out there. Other ones a bit shy and quiet. All sorts of characters there. So I'll come a bit closer to them. I've just got a question. What is it like for penguins to live in the pool? So basically they spend a lot of the time in a couple of hours a day. I'll just come a bit closer to the birds. So they spend a lot of time in the water and can actually drink seawater, and that's pretty much because of a special gland located on their beak fluids. So you'll also see penguins grooming themselves. Basically, that's them rubbing oil to help make sure they're staying nice and waterproof and keeping a clean and pretty coat. I'm getting asked how fast could they swim. So basically, they're quite quick for their size. About 8 kilometers an hour is their maximum speed. To put that in perspective, that's faster than Olympic swimmers. And they can maintain that speed for a lot longer. So 8 kilometers an hour, faster than Michael Phelps for those of you who know him. How deep can they dive? About 66 meters, and you're looking for a breath hold about 90 seconds to almost 2 minutes. It is likely they can exceed that, although most dives are pretty shallow as that's where their food is typically found. Any final questions before we do wrap this up? You can see they are very, very curious, also very, very cautious, so that's what helps them stay alive. I'm getting asked, how do you tell males and females apart? It's like male humans and females. Basically, they have a cloaca which does everything. That's their solution. I'm getting asked, I thought there were sharks in the pool. Is it a bit dangerous for them to swim there? So Port Jackson's over there. These species that we selected to go in with them are no threat to them whatsoever. What these ones might also go for urchins, small fish. A penguin is much too big despite their small size. Good question though. Up. So something around the world, and there are multiple threats, especially for these guys being the smallest, the most vulnerable. They are suffering from is introduced species. For example, our cats and dogs were not native to Australia until humans brought them over. Cats and dogs easily on a beach where little penguins are found. Keep your dogs on a leash or away from the beaches, and keep your cats in at night time. They can easily take out a poor little penguin. Foxes are another big predator. And that's part of the reason why the Sydney population is declining. So control measures are in place, and we're trying to increase that to give them a chance. But cats and dogs is your way of helping them in your day-to-day life. The next biggest threat they are suffering from is being caught in fishing gear, like fishing lines gets tangled around them. If they're caught, they can't feed and forage properly, especially if they've got to return to swap shifts with their partner. That is a huge issue. The next biggest issue is climate change and habitat destruction. So climate change is happening, the waters are warming, other species like the pilchards we were just feeding them have to migrate to find their comfortable zones too, meaning mum and dad have to swim a lot further to find that food. Where do penguins sleep? So they sleep inland and on water. So a typical penguin, when they're foraging for their partner, for their chick while their partner's on the nest, can actually sleep out at sea. They form little rafts where they just basically hang out together, safety in numbers. And then on land, they can sleep standing up, lying down, or in their nest boxes. But typically, they save their sleep for night, as that's when they're less vulnerable to those predators. How high can they jump? It's only about a 5 centimetre jump there, but they can easily get on top of these rocks and nest boxes around me. Why are they all watching the left-hand side? So basically, you can see in the back there, they're having a bit of a discussion. It is breeding season, so they're trying to impress their mates or potential mates, and that's where all the action seems to be going on right now. And once they've found a partner, they will stay for them typically for a season, but these are available, so that is quite an interesting myth being debunked there. These are the sharks we were talking about before. You can see Bella just giving them some food. So just to clarify, these are Port Jackson sharks and not a threat to them whatsoever. In fact, they help clean up the scraps that the penguins drop. Any more final questions before we wrap this up? In case you join a bit later on or watch this later, please do leave some comments and address them in another further live stream. But this is us signing off. So first of all, bye from the penguins. Bye from Bella, if you can see her through the bush. Have a wonderful day, guys. Be safe.